Hello and welcome back everybody. Today we're going to do Armored Core 6 on ARC GPU. Welcome to Response PC, I'm Dunk, let's game on. First I want to say that the game will be tested on the same setup, just changing the GPU for the next test. So it will be the i5 12600K, 32GB of RAM, and we start off with the A310. We're playing at 1080p, render is turned off, and the setting is set at high. We get an average of 40 FPS, so if you want a bit more FPS you can tune down a bit the settings, but this game is a third-person shooter, non-competitive, so as long as you're over 30 FPS, in my opinion, you should be okay. And since we are at 40 FPS, that's good enough in my opinion. The GPU is a 4GB of VRAM, and we're using 5.5, meaning we're using a bit of the system memory to be able to run everything. GPU is obviously pegged at 100%, the CPU is in the mid-20s, and we're using 12GB of system memory. The frame time graph is quite smooth on top of that. Next up, we have the ARC A380, still at 1080p, high settings, no renders whatsoever. We get an average of 54 FPS. We're getting close to the highly playable 60 FPS. For sure, if you drop the settings to medium, you will reach your 60 FPS, or playing with the render if you're into that. This GPU have a 6GB of VRAM using 5.7, so we're not using a slower system memory to compensate. GPU still pegged at 100%. The CPU is in the mid-30s, and we're using 10.1GB of system memory. A nice little card to play a nice little game. Next up, we have the A580, and since we're playing quite well at 1080p with the younger sibling, A310 and A380, I jumped right away to 1440p. Still at high settings, we get an average of 76 FPS. This is highly playable at a quite nice resolution. The GPU is pegged at 99%, and we're using 6.5GB of VRAM out of 8. This GPU at 179, if you can still find one, is still a really nice budget, even compared to the B580 or B570. This card is still under the 200 bracket, and have a decent FPS age in most games at 1080p, and this one we're playing at 1440p. Next up, I have the A750 Elden Ring Edition, still at 1440p. Now we'll push the setting from high to the maximum, still at render off. We get an average of 72 FPS. We drop a little bit FPS compared to the A580, but we are now at max settings instead of high. And at 72 FPS, this is highly playable. GPU is pegged at 99%, using 6.8GB of VRAM out of 8. The CPU is at mid-50 to mid-40 utilization, and we're using 9.7GB of RAM. That means the A750 is perfect for 1440p to play Armored Core 6 Fire Rubicon at max settings. Next up is my Intel A770 LE with a 16GB of VRAM, which won't make any difference in this game because we don't use more than 7GB of VRAM. We are still at 1440p because I don't have a 4K monitor or ultra wide, and we're still at maximum settings because that's the maximum settings the game can put you on. I got an average of 82 FPS, so this is highly playable if it were not about the black screen. Yep, every now and then I encounter a black screen with the A770 in Armored Core. I have no idea why. All the other ARC GPU didn't give me that issue, and this looked like an issue when the ARC Alchemist GPU came out. I have a lot of a driver issue, and in game sometimes you get a black screen for a couple seconds and it came back. And yes, I DDU the driver and reinstalled a fresh new driver. The issue persists, and I have absolutely no idea what is causing it. If it weren't for that issue, the game will be highly playable with the A770, and I don't know if it's just my card or driver issue, and if other people encounter that issue, but I'm stuck with a black screen for 2-3 seconds now and then. And finally, the B580. I have the ASRock Challenger variant. We're still again at 1440p, maximum settings, and no rendering. The card fare quite well. We are at 104 FPS, 104 FPS. The GPU is almost pegged, 96-97% utilization. CPU is in the mid-50s to low 40s, and we're using a 10.5GB of RAM. The card is cheaper than the A770, and it performed better than the A770. And I did not encounter any black screen. I'm pretty sure at this point with this game you can play at 4K with the B580. Today was the release of the B570. I just got mine from the store this evening, but it won't be in this footage since I already did all my recording, but it will be in the next recording for the ARC series. Thanks for watching, see you in the next one, and subscribe.